We're rapidly moving towards a place where those closest to us don't have to disappear. Already, AI models such as Veo, Kling and Runway can take photographs of our loved ones and create videos from them. If you've never tried this, then trust me when I say you'd be shocked by the results. Seeing someone you knew who passed away 10 or 20 years ago move as though they're alive triggers something deep within. In just a few short years, AI has evolved from just being able to make people blink and smile to fully animating them with unsettling accuracy. And as this technology develops, it won't just animate loved ones that died many years ago, it will be able to reconstruct them in the digital world fully. Their voice, their mannerisms, their personalities, even if they left almost no digital footprint whatsoever. That's because between family photos, shared genetics, and the online traces of their relatives, there'll be enough, more than enough data to build something that looks, sounds, and feels right. This worries me, and I think it should worry everyone, because while the technical capability to do this genuinely fascinates and astounds me, I think that the implications of actually using it in this way would be detrimental to us as individuals and as a society. This kind of technology could fundamentally change what it means to lose someone, remember someone, or even know someone while they're alive. So in this video, I want to highlight two very different pathways this technology will allow us to follow. One helps us to open a window into the past, to illuminate history and to observe once more our ancestors and the people who made us who we are, while the other extracts the essence of these people, often without their permission, to transform them into permanent digital ghosts. This isn't sci-fi, this is a very near future that we're racing towards at breakneck speed. So enough of the intro, let's dive in. Every person lives multiple lives. That's because our lives don't just unfold within the confines of our own minds. They also play out inside the minds of every person we properly connect with. And these multiple internal versions aren't random, they're targeted, unique, and special. They're carefully built models shaped by thousands of small interactions, moments, and emotions that everyone experiences differently. Take, for example, the mental model you have of a relative, friend, or partner. It's imperfect, selective, and distorted, but it's specific to you and it's yours. That's what makes memory personal, and in my mind, it's what makes it magical. But memory is quite fragile and surprisingly susceptible to alteration. Our memories shift over time, adapt, fill in gaps, and gradually rewrite themselves as time passes. In reality, when we recall an interaction with someone from years ago, we're actually recalling the memory of that interaction. That's how two people who experience the exact same thing can end up remembering it in very different ways. For me, this is where the concept of digital ghosts is most concerning, because if you can introduce a system that can simulate someone with high fidelity, you're no longer remembering your memories of them. At that point, you've created a new version of them, one that can generate new responses, new conversations, and new moments that never actually happened. Now, clearly, that's why people will want to do this, to enable new interactions with people they've lost and miss. But over time, these new moments won't sit separately in our minds. They'll blend in. The real and the artificial will start to merge until the boundary between what we recall and what's been freshly generated begins to become difficult to separate. At that point, you're replacing memories, not preserving them. You'll have taken something personal, imperfect, and deeply human and outsourced it to a system with the ability to overwrite it. Not in a way you'll necessarily notice, and not in a way that immediately feels wrong, but in an insidious way that threatens to gradually dissolve the real relationships we've had with people we loved and who loved us. There's something else happening, and although less obvious, I think it's much more important. Human relationships are, and always have been, shaped by limitations. Time's limited, attention's limited, and ultimately our lifespans are limited. All of these restrictions make us treasure life in ways we often don't reflect upon. They're the reason we might feel the need to visit people, forgive things, listen more attentively, or make time when we otherwise wouldn't. Because in the back of our minds, we understand that one day these opportunities won't be there. You see, death is the ultimate form of friction. It forces closure. It's the end of a book, something we find painful, unfair, and almost unbearable. So it's understandable that we'd want to ease that pain of loss. But what happens when that friction is removed? What happens when instead of losing someone, we retain access to a version of them indefinitely? Even if it's not quite perfect, even if it's not quite them, but close enough to feel like continuity. Well, I'll make a really simple prediction here. It will change our behavior. It can't not change our behavior. Because if a version of someone is always going to be available tomorrow, then the pressure to engage with them today naturally lessens. Maybe our tolerance for their flaws drops and our motivation to show up, listen, and to be present starts to erode. It could create a situation where we know, even on a subconscious level, that technology will prevent us from ever really losing anyone. We might start to frame connection as eternal, something we can always call on AI to sort out for us later. And over time, I can't see why that wouldn't reshape how we value people while they're alive. Because having the option of permanence takes away urgency. And without urgency, relationships lose part of what makes them special in the first place. Okay, so you can see the potential pitfalls in bringing people back in digital form. And you may conclude that these issues will ultimately prevent us from embracing this technology as a society. But to conclude that would be to ignore what will drive all this forward. That's because we must remember this technology will be woven into the systems we already exist in. Systems that monetize attention, encourage us actively to reduce friction wherever we can, and turn discomfort into a money-making opportunity. And clearly, grief is one of the most powerful forms of discomfort we'll ever experience. As a result, it's almost inevitable that digital ghosts will become a popular product, yet another service to grease the wheels of life. Bear in mind, analog versions of this already exist. Mediums and spiritualists offer services to reconnect us with those we've lost. They have done for centuries. But now we're entering an era where the pain of grief can be softened and managed through technology. A new way to remove the friction of death, one that actually guarantees real results. At first, anyone using these kinds of services, grief tech as it's beginning to be called, will likely find them useful, helpful, comforting even. But when something becomes a service, it always arrives with conditions, costs, subscription services, cloud storage, and access to AI networks, which raises some quite uncomfortable questions. For example, who pays to keep a digital version of someone running? What happens if that cost becomes too high? Do we then face a second loss, one where we're forced to turn off someone we've continued interacting with? Imagine you get an email from the grief tech company you signed up to saying you now need to pay more than you can afford to keep your loved one alive. That's not a technical problem, that's an emotional one, and it introduces something that we've never had to deal with before. The idea that a person, anyone, all of us, can exist in a semi-permanent state, entirely dependent on infrastructure, funding, and ongoing maintenance, dependent on a commercial company, an entire system driven by the goals of capitalism. At that stage, we find ourselves dealing with a commercialized version of human presence, not the memory of loved ones. A service that provides shadows of the people we connected with in real life, forcing them to belong to neither the past nor the present. Gone from the physical world and now only active in the digital landscape for as long as we're able or willing to pay their rent. What worries me most is that the concept of fully realized interactive digital ghosts is not far away. In fact, the foundations are already here. I'm not making this video to question whether we can do this. We can, and we will. I'm making this video to encourage people to question whether they should do it when the opportunity arrives. In my mind, there's a meaningful difference between using AI to look back fondly on the people we knew and using it to simulate them fully. One can actually sharpen our memories, creating AI videos from photographs, animates our recollections to make them more vivid in our minds. But simulating them risks replacing memory, overwriting traces of real interactions with synthetic connections that exist as nothing more than binary code. Maybe the most important thing we need to consider is this: not everything in the human experience is supposed to be optimized. Not everything should be smoothed out, extended, or made easier, even when that thing is really hard to deal with, even when that thing is death itself. We need to remember that some things matter because they end, because they're finite. That's why so many songs, artworks, and novels are inspired by loss. It's a fundamental human experience. It forces us to feel, reflect, and then eventually to come to terms with letting go. To be clear, as this technology develops, the choice over whether we use it to bring people back won't, I don't think, come from regulation. And it certainly won't come from companies. They'll be doing everything they can to convince us it's the right thing to do. Instead, it will come from us, from our own decision making. Personally, I think I'll allow the lives of the people that I knew and loved to remain finite. Because regardless of the detrimental effects that I'm sure this will have, when you zoom out and reflect on things, it just feels like the right thing to do. To protect their memory, to protect our memories, and to protect what it means to be human. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future.